to do that. We know that Hitler was elected when Germany was only printing up 30% of every dollar it spent. We are near the end. We are near a great crisis when the government checks start to bounce. And we are seeing that in program after program. Everything that the government has gotten its filthy fat fingers on doesn't work anymore. And you've heard that all day. You know it already. You already know it, but the rest of Oregon does not already know it. So I'm trying to spread that message in perhaps a way that some of the people other than you in Oregon can hear. And I want to offer you 3 themes to stress with the ignorant. But these are the themes about what has gone wrong, and these are themes about which everyone can agree. My first theme is decentralization. If people think about it, which they don't, they will realize that it makes very little sense to have somebody 2,000 miles away in some ivory tower or in some ivory federal office building making the rules about what happens here in Oregon on the ground or out in a rural area where they don't know anything about it at all. And we know they don't know anything about it at all because they come up with the craziest rules you've ever heard. They come up with the wildland fire policy that says you can't fight forest fires with bulldozers or chainsaws because that would disturb the wilderness character of the area. It's much better for the wilderness if we burn it all down and kill everything that's in it. This has happened over and over again. Oregon lost $10 billion in state income from the Biscuit Fire alone because they let it burn. We know that this process is occurring with healthcare. We know it's occurring with education. It's even occurring with little things like the water supply in Portland, where they want something to cover up the reservoirs and they want to double the water rates so they can tax the people harder and harder for more and more things they don't need. And another process of centralization, with this power rising to the top like scum, is that more and more and more agencies are in charge of the same thing. It used to be bad when maybe only 13 or 14 agencies were in charge of the same thing, like salmon recovery, a subject I happen to be an expert in. Now we have like 100 agencies in charge of healthcare. And even a Democrat, or even a Democrat who's not employed by the government, can understand that when you have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 agencies in charge of the same thing, nothing gets done because they spend all their time talking to each other and writing reports. Before I moved my office recently, on my wall, I had 40,000 pages of reports about salmon recovery. And there were more and more reports, and there were fewer and fewer salmon. And then the natural cycles turned, and there were more salmon. And boy, those 40,000 pages of reports must have done a great job, right? Because we have, with centralization, a government that gets further and further from the truth. When they are disconnected from reality, then they have computer models. So now, instead of regulating real environmental problems, we regulate computer models. I have been litigating against the federal government and the state government my entire life in the area of environmental law. And I have seen bogus computer models that no jury would ever accept if they understood them. So the government took care of that too. You don't have jury trials in environmental cases. You have federal judges who are told by the Attorney General's office that they shouldn't get into the science. They should just trust the government because, gosh, they're not the experts. We have these other experts. I will tell you that as Attorney General, things will be very different in the area of environmental law. When some scientist comes to me, like they did 10 years ago, and says, I've got a model of how the endangered coho work. Look at this, you know, we have to shut down everything. And one interesting feature of my model is the more coho there are, the more endangered they are. And I looked at him, and the state's attorney guy looked at him and said, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. So he quit and became a judge, and I kept soldiering on. But the point is that we have these attorney generals people in the state every day making, just advancing this as environmental science. It used to be we had environmental law that made sense. It used to be there's a farmer, he had some cows, a cloud of fluorine blows into him and kills him. He goes into court, he sues, he wins. Or somebody dumps something in a river and kills all the fish. You got a pile of dead fish, you got an environmental problem. Now, we got a different kind of problem. We got cancer. We got cancer of government. We've got cells and cells of government employees multiplying and multiplying, creating these great tumors of agencies that are involved in regulating problems that do not really exist as a practical matter. And so we have regulations all over Oregon that are so complicated, nobody can understand them, that say you're not really allowed to do anything at all, because if you do anything, it'll make things worse, and the world is about to end as we know it, so everything must stop. At least everything in the nature of productive economic activity that makes things and creates jobs for Oregonians. So, decentralization, the first theme. The second theme, simplicity. Everybody knows that the government has gone berserk in terms of complexity, which, by the way, is the handmaiden of fraud. Because if you can pass some 20,000 pages of regulations and 2,000 pages of statute, nobody can read all these things. They're cooked up in the dark by these little people conspiring to write this stuff that nobody knows. And then Nancy Pelosi tells us, well, we got to vote for it so we can see what's in it. And then, after the meat puppets that we keep sending to Congress vote for this stuff, then they've got to pass the 20,000 pages of regulations. But I'll tell you something more serious. You know what separated us for a long time from every third world little hole? What separated us was the rule of law. And I was taught to revere the rule of law. I was taught that law meant that you had a rule, and you could follow the rules. You could read the rule, and you could know what is legal, and you could know what is illegal.